Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. This was sent to me by Awaken Realms, and is designed by Krzysztof Piskorski and Marcin Swierkot. Tainted Grail is a story-rich survival and exploration game for 1 to 4 players set in a dark universe that blends Arthurian legends and Celtic mythology with a unique dark vision. Each player controls one of 4 unlikely heroes who must face impossible odds where stronger and wiser champions have failed. Chased by the encroaching, twisted power of the weirdness, fighting an uphill battle against depleting resources and challenging encounters, the characters set off to achieve the impossible and die many times in the process. A system of story triggers lets players see the long-term consequences of their actions, while the deep branching storyline allows them to tackle problems in different ways, ensuring no two games play alike. Also, I don't know if it's wordness or weirdness. I think it's weirdness. W-Y-R-D-ness. I'm going to say weirdness. Sorry if that is not correct. So, this is a legacy game. It is meant to be played, many sessions. And so there are also spoilers. But in this review, I will not be spoiling anything. The game does come with a open and play sort of tutorial. I'm going to be using that to kind of show you the mechanics and just kind of teach you sort of what happens in the game, but not show anything that's actually a spoiler. So let me show you how to play. So in Tainted Grail, you have 4 characters. I'm just using Bior here because he is what is used in the tutorial. You have these universal markers that mark your stats along with your resources. And you have a map up here where you place Bihor and what's called a menhir. Each character also has a combat deck and a diplomacy deck. And you also mark your energy, your health, and your terror. The order of the day, you do a couple things. These menhirs can expire. So when you look at this menhir, they have this sort of disc here. And the number, which I actually think is super unclear because it's really hard to read, but that's an 8. So these timers sort of start going down each day. So you set all the timers on the board down by 1. There are also other cards that can have timers. Everything is reduced by 1. And then you reveal an event card. Depending on the scenario you're playing or the chapter, there is a deck of event cards, some random, some story-driven. Without spoiling anything, I'll just show you one of the examples they have in this tutorial. It might be something like Quest. Speak with Connacht's blacksmith, Urfir. Hint, to meet Urfir, you have to explore the Connacht farmhold location. They might also say stuff like, oh, the weather's bad, so you have to spend more energy to travel, or so on and so forth. So you always pull out an event card, see what happens, and then you go on your journey. Now, this game can be played with up to 4 players, so I'm just showing you a solo version here. So you can do actions. Actions cost energy, and you track your energy using this. So I could do an explore, and that would cost 1 energy, and you move the cube down. What exploring is you basically get to look at the current location card and flip it. So for the Connacht farm, you look back, you read all this stuff, and then it gives you directions. Like if you have certain statuses, you might have to do things, or have certain, like the secret card 66, or a certain status, you read certain verses. Otherwise, you read the main part of the exploration journal, which is this massive book filled with narrative. So for the Connacht farm zone or farmhold, it has this whole thing here where it's almost like a choose your own adventure, where depending on what status is at, it directs you to go to certain verses. When you go to a verse, you usually have to make some sort of choice. So the first one of the choices here can be like, visit the families of champions from the first expedition, or ask the townsfolk to help you prepare, or rest for the day in your own home, or wander the alleys twisted by the weirdness. Whatever decision you make, you go to read that passage, and then once it says exploration ends at the end of a passage, that means your action is done. And they all have different things. I'm not going to show them all. they might say stuff like, oh, you gain these things, or this happens, or whatever. Statuses that you earn are marked on this list back here of your party sheet to keep track of what statuses you have, because depending on certain statuses you have, you will unlock different choices. So that's one possible action. Another action is travel. You can move your character to any location connected to your current one. However, you cannot move diagonally. And they have to have these direction arrows. So I could go, spend 1 energy, go to the Charred Conclave. Also, you may notice on some of these cards, they have location actions. Like this one that I was on. Oh, I hate these discs as they fall out all the time. It kind of drives me fucking crazy. Anyway, for the Connacht Farmhold, you could spend 1 energy doing chores for the townsfolk, which gets you 1 reputation once per day. Reputation is one of the resources on your character board. So that's another action you can do. Characters also have their own character action, like Bior here. If you spend 4 energy points, you can craft, which lets you draw 3 random craftable items and pick one, only in settlements. Each character also has a sort of flaw, in this case Festering Wound. Lose 1 health each time you become exhausted. A free action you can always do is inspect a menhir. If you are on the same space as a menhir, you are allowed to basically look under the card and read the resources that is required to light that menhir. It shows you down here to activate this menhir. It requires all characters. A menhir writes secret card in the Stone Shaper's Tool secret card. You pay 2 energy, 2 health, 2 wealth, and 2 magic per player, and put a new menhir model on that location and set its dial back to normal. These menhir are important because as they tick down, first off, you can't explore cards outside of a menhir's radius. So while this menhir is lit, you can explore the cards around it. However, like let's say I found a menhir, I don't know, here, just for example, but it went out, then I could no longer access this location because it's out of range of my lit menhirs, which is why you need to spend resources to make sure these stay lit. Once you've decided to finish the day, you can pass. If you use too much energy, you become exhausted. We'll get into that later, but that's something that can happen. So let's go through the end of the day phase. First, you eat a food. If you eat a food, you restore 1 of your health and lose 1 terror. If you don't have enough food or don't want to eat a food, you drop your energy down to 0. If it's already at 0, you lose 1 health instead. The next step is to restore your energy. So if you are exhausted in this red range here, you only restore 4 points of energy. If you are not, you would go all the way up to here instead. Then, if you have experience points, which you mark here, you can advance your character. We'll get into that later. You can build your character decks using the cards you've collected. And then you experience dreams. If you are on a tile with a dream icon, let me show you one of those. Yeah, they look like this. Then you read that dream passage from the book. I won't spoil what the dreams say, though. Sometimes they're plot related, sometimes they're not. So let's go over some of the basic rules. That's sort of just how the general how you play and explore the board and go through days. Let's go through some rules. You have your 3 tracks, your energy, which you use for actions, your health, which is your physical condition. If you run out of health, you get a You Are Dying card, which you attach. You can never have more energy than health. So this marker down here as it goes also limits how much energy you can have. So that's also detrimental. If you ever have more terror than health, like this, you panic during combat and diplomacy. So this shape sort of reminds you of those thresholds. If your terror ever goes up to here, you go insane, and then you get an insane card. Each character has attributes. There's aggression, courage, practicality. Let me sort of hold this up so you can see this better. Aggression, courage, practicality, empathy, caution, and spirituality. These, depending on how many you have, like I have 2 in aggression, 1 in courage, certain scenarios might give you better options depending on your attributes. And then you have your 5 resources: food, wealth, reputation, experience, and magic. These are used in various scenarios for different things. As you travel around the board, you will unlock more locations, and when you do, you place the cards from the deck adjacent to them. It tells you with the number what cards to place. However, they have to be close to an active menhir, like I mentioned before. Some cards also have instant rules, like for example, this one says you draw a gray encounter when you enter this location once per day. Encounters are like battles or situations that you have to go through. If you are ever in a situation where a location card is removed, because like I mentioned, if you don't keep these menhirs lit and you're too far away, like let's say there was a menhir here and I'm here, I am in a removed card and all characters immediately lose 2 health and gain 2 terror and are moved to the closest remaining location card. Events, I'm not going to go through those because those are all pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, and there's also party actions. If you do stuff in a party, you can trade food, wealth, items, and secrets at any time. So you can kind of work together if you choose to do stuff as a party action versus a single action. There are 4 different types of encounters. Green cards are for wild encounters, gray is for the world of men, purple is for supernatural, and blue is a special non-combat deck. I only have the first encounter card set up here for that. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff I don't need to go through immediately. You can get items, there are guardians, and secrets. One thing to note is for character advancement, how it works in this game is you have some options. You can pay 2 experience points if you have them to take cards from your advancement pool. Each character has a certain number of cards that you can add. It's sort of like a deck building thing where you add better cards to your pool. And you can swap them in and out. You just gotta make sure you have at least 15 in each deck. You can also advance your attributes. Each pair of opposing attributes like aggression and empathy or courage and caution, it depends on how many points you have. So in this pair where I have 1 practicality and 0 spirituality, that's 1 point in that pair. So my second point would cost 4 experience points because it costs 2 for each additional one. If they were both bare, then my first point in either one would be worth 2 experience. The next one will cost 4 experience, then 6 experience, so on and so forth. Whenever you gain a 3rd point in any single attribute, you attach a skill card. These give you special abilities. I'm not going to show them because you don't need to see them right now. Yeah, if you are ever dead because of the 0 health, what happens is in single player mode, it ends when you die. If you're in a party, you can take characters that have been unclaimed and claim those. Insanity, there are different effects depending on that. So that's pretty much the gist of exploring and the basic rules. And now let's talk about combat. Combat encounters can happen when you go on certain locations or this and that. So let's kind of go through this. So let's say we had a green encounter, and this is a mist-shaped vermin. These are usually not on the card. This is just for the tutorial card. So the goal of an encounter is you need to get this many cubes to win. In this case, 4. There are also attribute keys, a combat pool, and a combat table that determines the enemy's attack. With my combat deck, you draw 3 cards, and you take a look at them. The first card you play does not need to fulfill any special requirements. Like usually with these attributes, you got to pay attention to what they connect to. But in this case, I can kind of freely choose. So if I connected this card like this, you can see that here I do a 1 times a cube, and I check to see if I have this attribute. I do. I have at least 1 in this attribute, so I can get 2 cubes by attaching this card here. So that's 2 towards the battle. Then you have the option, actually I need to read this. So when you look at the card, it has 2 abilities. The first causes all enemies to deal 1 more damage. And the second requires you to place a timer token on the attack card, and this will be resolved later. So something like that. Now, each turn you may play only one card, plus as many additional cards as you can connect using your bonus icons. So if I look at my hand here, I have the Ignore Pain card. And this card has a lightning bolt symbol on it. So if I connect it like this, removing the token, you can see that these connect, this connects, and this connects. So first off, in order to play this card in the first place, I need to connect a card with a lightning bolt on it to an existing key. And in this case, it works. These blue ones are magic. I can spend magic to connect these. However, I don't need it because I already have this connected because I have that attribute. And then down here, I get to draw a card as a bonus because this key connected. Now, I check, I did not get 2 cubes. That means the enemy gets to attack. I forgot to mention, because I covered this card, this delayed effect doesn't happen anymore. And then the enemy would attack, and so you check the table and you see how much damage it does. And with 2 markers, it does 1 damage to Bior, and you would mark it on your character sheet. During the end of the turn, you must discard until you have 3 cards in your hand. You have only 2, so this doesn't apply. And then you draw a card. So you drew a card as an extra, and you drew another at the end of the turn. In the second combat turn, you can play, so let's say I do Battle Cry, which I'll connect this here. All right, so the next time I get to play, remember the first card, it doesn't matter what you connect to, because the golden one is all that matters. This will let me draw an extra card. I don't have magic, so I can't get an extra cube, but I draw a card. I just drew Throw, which is a perfect card because I can connect it with the keys. So this lightning bolt lets me connect to this, that lets me use the card, and that gives me another cube. I also forgot to mention, with Ignore Pain, you get one cube for every point of damage you received. So actually, it had 1 extra cube, and then with this, that will be enough to kill it, because then I'll have 4 cubes on it. Sorry, there's a lot of shit going on in the combat. So, once you do that, you perform what's called a victory check. There are 4 markers. In this case, the loot is 1 food, so Bior earns a food for the battle, and it is done. That's how combat works. Now let's go through diplomacy. Diplomacy is very similar. You're with connecting stuff, but in this case, it's non-violent encounters. So if I encounter a blue encounter, which is non-violent, in this case, it's a suspicious guard. And so I place it down, and then I place one of these cubes on the gray stage in the middle of this meter here. Our goal is we want to move it up on the affinity track up to the top. If it moves to the bottom, we lose. There are different stages and also bonuses and enemy responses, but let's just kind of go through it. So, kind of like a combat turn, you draw 3 cards, for this time diplomacy cards. And then I can play the Eye for Detail. So I connect it like this. And so how this works is I do have the special symbol, and I do have this attribute. So that means I get to move, according to this chart, the cube up 1 space on the track. Then you place a timer on this because there's a delayed ability. In this case, draw 1 card. Now I'm not going to play an extra card. It's time for the affinity check. It is not on the highest end or lowest end, so the opponent gets to respond. In this case, their response is they always move it down 1. That ends the turn. You just discard down to 3 and then draw a card. For the second turn, I would remove this token, which lets me draw a card, and then I can play Misdirection. And so if I connect it like this, the 2 times here lets me move the cube up twice, like that. And then I can play Threatening Voice as my second card, like this. Connecting it here because the lightning bolt is there connected, which lets me do it in the first place. And in this case, I can lose 1 reputation with this card. And if I have at least 2 aggression, I can move it up. So using that special ability, that takes me to the top of the track, perform a victory check, and we win. The reward in this case is we gain a reputation anyway, so it worked out. That is how both combat and diplomacy encounters work. They're this sort of key connecting system where you play a card, and if you want to play a second card, you got to make sure you connect a lightning bolt to a key, and these ones are use magic, and they all have special effects. And that's pretty much the core game. You go around, you have encounters, sort of like choose your own adventure situations, explore, and you're basically trying to do quests, and each chapter is very different, and also making sure to light these menhirs so that they don't go out, so that you can continue to explore. And that's the main game flow of Tainted Grail.
So this is a pretty divisive game, and you'll know if this is a game for you or not, depending on the rules. Well, actually, maybe not, because let me kind of talk about this. I can safely say that this game is not for me, and I'm kind of surprised by this. I love exploration games. I love legacy games. I had a good time with like something like Seventh Continent, and this game has a lot of similarities in that you're going around exploring tiles, reading passages, doing, choose your own adventure type tasks, doing skill checks. I like that. I also think the writing in this game is pretty good. But tacked onto what should be a fun exploring adventure are mechanics that feel very suffocating and repetitive. Having to activate the menhirs is an absolute slog that just gets in the way of wanting to experience the story. You can't even move diagonally on the board, so it's like, oh wait, hold on, instead of exploring more fun stuff, we gotta go back, that menhir is about to go out, and you spend a lot of resources, honestly. So have these big dumb statues, which by the way, take up so much, they look cool, but they're extremely distracting. The dials don't stay in, they like, you can't see past them to see like important information on the board. They're really silly. And so they're both physically and mentally taxing mechanics. Because these big dumb statues, they'll just shut off and prevent you from progressing if you're not careful. And then there's the combat, which is okay. I think the key connecting stuff is decent, but it gets repetitive, it's a little fiddly, and also a lot of encounters can chain more encounters. I never really enjoyed the combat enough where I was like excited to do combat, and that's a problem when it becomes so prevalent. It really feels like this sort of separate, tedious mechanic that it's like, oh, we gotta do an encounter. And you just go through the same, play the cards, connect the cards. It's okay. Perhaps the biggest issue, though, for this game is that it can be very punishing if you just have bad luck. Because you oftentimes are just trying to find information or find things. But if you don't have the right status or right item or random part of this quest line, fuck you. Or you just don't happen to have the right skill or this for this situation, you get punished. This is something I would take in stride in a regular exploration game, because usually it's like, oh well, it's just part of the experience, let's move on. But in this game, because those timers are constantly going down, it sucks when you hit a wall because of bad luck or factors out of your control, because you're like, god damn it, like because we just had bad luck and here, that now we gotta go back and fill that thing again. It's very irritating. So even deck building, which I love, and the skill advancement in this is pretty fun and I enjoyed it, but it couldn't salvage for me what really feels like 3 different games struggling for my attention. A pretty fun exploration game that is bogged down by a very irritating, constantly having to gather resources to fill these things, and an okay combat card game that doesn't have the legs for me to justify its existence. There's stuff to enjoy in this. I think the writing and art and presentation are strong. And really, I just wish I could have been left to enjoy the story. There is like a story mode, but even then it still has the stupid menhirs. They're just so annoying. Overall, the game unfortunately feels like a slog, when I feel like if it had just been a little more focused on the narrative, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But having these annoying mechanics that get in the way and make it too long, and they're not that fun, or they're tedious, or they're irritating, it really soured the game experience for me.